mushroom soup that really tastes like mushrooms, not just cream. Well, let's forget about all that canned soup and do it right here at America's Test Kitchen as we uncover the secrets of homemade cream soups.
Join Christopher Kimball, editor-in-chief of Cook's Illustrated magazine, Test Kitchen chefs Julia Cullen and Bridget Lancaster, Doc Willoughby at the science desk, Jack Bishop from the tasting lab, and Adam Reed in the equipment corner. Discover the secrets of America's foremost food testers and tasters today on America's Test Kitchen. Brought to you by Sub-Zero Freezer Company, makers of refrigerators for many rooms, many lifestyles. From the classic framed look to stainless steel or disguised with an overlay. Sub-Zero Freezer Company, creating a full line of refrigerators for the home. And by Sur La Table, suppliers of equipment to cooks and professional chefs at Sur La Table stores and catalogs nationwide. And by Geerlings and Wade, helping you to be an educated wine connoisseur. A worldwide selection delivered to your door.
Just between you and me, we know that we have very fond taste memories of Campbell's soup. Tomato soup, we've all had that growing up, at least I did. And cream of mushroom soup, hey, it's also used in casseroles. But we just did a little tasting here at America's Test Kitchen, and guess what? Both of these turned out dead last. This tomato soup tasted like cream of ketchup soup, and the mushroom soup, hey, I couldn't even taste the mushrooms. So we thought we could do better, and in a minute we're going to go back with Bridget in the kitchen to figure out how to really get tomato flavor in our tomato soup. But first, just a few minutes with Jack to figure out which kind of commercial chicken broth is really the best. I have a public confession to make, which is it's been about 6 months since I made homemade chicken stock, even though I know it's much better than the can. So the question is, if you're lazy like me, and after a year you have about 50 pounds of chicken parts sitting in the bottom of your freezer, if you go out and buy this stuff, which we all do you buy canned? If so, which kind? There's a couple other things that you can buy. Jack is here to help us make some sense of that.
Chris, we went shopping in the supermarket. We picked up 15 different broths, brought them back to the test kitchen, 20 tasters, hoping and praying something would taste like homemade stock. The bad news is we didn't fool anybody. We threw a homemade stock in and everybody picked it out. The good news is that a couple of them are at least acceptable. Why don't you start tasting and see if you can find...
So this is all about second best?
Well, you know, especially if you set the bar at homemade, you're just not going to find anything that resembles homemade. But we found a couple that people really liked well enough to use, especially in a pureed soup. Oh, you like that one?
Well, I guess not.
And the interesting thing is, once we started reading the labels, we figured out why certain brands ended up at the top of the ratings. And it's simply sodium and MSG. The more sodium and the presence of MSG, the more character, if you want to use that word, the broths had, and they rated more highly.
One more time.
One more time?
This one tastes like a fair amount of sodium MSG, and therefore it has some flavor. This one is very vegetal.
Yeah,
It almost has... It's an absence of flavor. It sucks the flavor out of your mouth.
Several tasters said if they were blindfolded, they would not know they were drinking chicken broth during most of the tasting. Many of the broths had absolutely no chicken character. Maybe a chicken once walked by the factory, but there's no real chicken flavor in some of them.
They waved the chicken over the thing. That one's much better. It's a little saltier, has a little more flavor. It's fairly bland, but that's fairly natural. It doesn't taste like it's got a lot of chemicals. This one I don't like at all. It has some strange flavor in it. It doesn't taste like chicken broth. So I would say this one feels like a lot of chemicals in it. Like some scientist, mad scientist, figured out how to make chicken broth without any chicken whatsoever. So it's a very MSG. This is bloody awful. It's like celery and water for a couple hours. This one is the most natural of them. It's not as strongly flavored. But I probably like this one the best, even though it doesn't have as much flavor. And this one I didn't care for.
All right, well, let me pull off the bags, and you can line up the mugs with the broths. And in fact, the top 4 were all Swanson and Campbell's. And in fact, Swanson and Campbell's are made by the same company. And it was just a question of the low sodium or the regular. This was the top rated. The regular Swanson and the regular Campbell's came in first and second.
Was this low sodium?
No, this is the regular one.
Okay.
And this is also the same product. You may be asking now why you liked this one and you weren't so wild about this one. We found that the broths in the aseptic packages, these cartons, had better flavor, and that's because they can be pasteurized and sterilized at lower temperatures and less time. And their cans are heated for an hour.
So what was this just horrendous?
This shows you this is an all-natural, free-range chickens used to make the broth, and there's no MSG in this, and
that's strange.
Not a lot of character.
This one actually, of all of these, tasted the most natural. It didn't have as much flavor as this, but it had a more natural taste.
Well, I gotta say you're in the minority here. This was sort of in the middle to the end of the rankings, along with this one. People really went for the high sodium, the MSG, which the Swansons and the Campbells.
This was the darling of the food community back in the 70s, 80s. Remember, we were around then. It's the one I still use at home, actually. Now, you haven't talked at all about the sort of premium brands of chicken broth, those fancy things that cost a lot of money. And I noticed that we have one sitting here called Glace du Poulet Gold,
yes,
which has to be good because the packaging's nice.
Well, this is a concentrate, 1.5 ounces, $4.59. When you reconstitute it with water, it becomes 4 cups. Last place.
Really? And how much was this again?
$4.59, 2 to 3 times the price of all the regular broths that come in cans and cartons, so not a good deal.
So the answer is, overall, the winner was the Swanson chicken broth.
That's the top choice.
And that was the top choice. And me, personally, I kind of like the one that has a little less flavor, collagen, but it tastes slightly more natural.
Right, as you can get the Swanson in the carton as opposed to the can, it's going to taste better.
Swanson's in the carton, that's the winner. Now we're going to make a really good cream of tomato soup, not a Campbell soup. And the most interesting thing about this recipe is this. We are not starting with
fresh tomatoes.
You might ask why, and we found that actually they have a more concentrated flavor.
You're more likely to be making this soup in the winter and fall anyway. Late fall and into winter, the best bet is canned tomatoes.
And also, we suggest you buy whole tomatoes packed in their juices, not in puree, because the puree is cooked a little longer, and we found there's less flavor. So with that in mind...
All right, this is very simple. I already have 1 can in my colander here. These are the big 28-ounce cans. I'm going to dump the rest of this in. I'm going to cut these in half and de-seed them, or seed them.
Just like
I'm going to take the seeds out, exactly. I'm just going to line them up on this sheet pan that I've covered with foil. And what we're going to do is we're going to roast these. Roasting, we found, concentrates the flavor of the tomato. It dehydrates it a little bit. The sugars in the tomatoes caramelize. And it just tastes a lot better.
Well, and also, just in case they don't, we're going to add a little brown sugar on top, too.
Yeah, we need a little sweetness. This is cream and tomato soup. It's certainly not as sweet as what you find in the can, but still really good. A little brown sugar never hurt anyone.
So we're starting with canned tomatoes. We're going to roast them. We're going to sprinkle some brown sugar on them to give them even more sweetness.
That's right.
To balance the acidity. You're using aluminum foil on the jelly roll pans. This makes it easier to clean up, or...
When these roast, they get sticky and caramelly, especially with brown sugar. This is just to clean up.
So you can get them off, and
exactly.
It becomes easier. This seems like actually a lot of effort to go to make the soup, but I've made this recipe 10 times.
Right.
And it's by far the best tomato soup you'll ever have. It's worth just a little bit of time roasting them.
The flavor that you get out of these roasted tomatoes are fantastic. So there we go. You can see there's lots of juice in here that have come out of the can and out of the tomatoes while I've been seeding them. We're going to reserve that juice, and we're going to use a little later. So let me just sprinkle this with, this is 1.5 tablespoons of dark brown sugar.
Yeah, we tried regular white sugar, and that just didn't quite have as much flavor.
No, this has a nice caramelly flavor that goes really well with the tomatoes. Nice bright tomato flavor, earthy sugar. It's very nice. So this goes in the oven. It's a 450 oven.
Okay.
And we're going to put it in there, and we're going to say goodbye for 30 minutes.
Okay, it's been 30 minutes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, you can see they look nothing like the tomatoes that went into the oven. They're almost like little pieces of tomato candy at this point.
They're very, very thin. All the moisture's gone, and they're very sweet, too. Have that roasted flavor.
Exactly.
So now what?
We're going to let them cool a little bit on the sheet pan. But I'm going to finish mincing some shallots. I've got 3 shallots already in here, and then here's my 4th. No science to this. You want to get it nice and small pieces. So we're going to sweat these in the pan until they're extremely soft. We don't want the shallots to get brown, so they need to be nice and small. Just add that. So, in this pan, over a nice medium heat, I melt my 4 tablespoons of butter. I'm going to heat them up until they're foaming. That should just take a moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to peel these lovely pieces. Sure, that'd be great. They might stick a little bit.
It's still a little warm.
Yeah, it's still a little warm, but we've got a bowl right over there.
Is that where they're headed?
Yes, that's exactly where they're headed.
Okay.
Oops. So this isn't glamorous. Butter's foaming. If you can hand me the shallots, I'll get started on that while you're making a mess there. And with the shallots, I'm going to add tomato paste. And this is just a tablespoon. And this little bit of tomato paste just intensifies that flavor even more, that nice, rich tomato flavor. This is a pinch of allspice. Allspice with tomatoes, just perfect.
Remember I asked earlier if it was necessary to use aluminum foil?
Aren't you glad you did?
Good luck taking that off a hot
Well, because not only
jelly
would you
roll
be
pan.
doing that, but then you'd have to wash the dish.
Okay, we're done.
Got the shallots, tomato paste, and the allspice in there. I'm going to cover this, and we're going to let them sweat for about 7 to 10 minutes.
At a really low heat.
Yeah, very low.
How are those shallots?
Oh, they're gorgeous. They smell fantastic, too. They're really nice and soft. Now I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of flour, and this is where that butter comes in handy. The butter and the flour are going to mix together, and they're going to form kind of a roux, just a little bit of a thickener. I'm going to let that flour cook for about 30 seconds. And now I'm going to whisk in that lovely chicken broth. And this is 1 3/4 cup. Oh, it's smelling great already. And this is that reserved tomato juice that we used. If you could go ahead and pour that in, that's 3 cups. There's that nice tomato color. And those reserved tomatoes too. Just plop those right in there. Fabulous. And we're just going to bring this to a boil over medium heat. I'm going to cover it to get it up there faster, and we're going to cook this for about 10 minutes. So in here is my lovely bubbling, simmering soup. And now I'm going to strain it. We're going to use the solids. We're going to put those in the blender. And we're just going to put some of the liquid in with the solids. This makes it so you don't have to puree in batches, and it keeps the color much more beautiful. I'm just going to spoon this right in there. All right. And I'm just going to put a cup of the liquid in with that. And I'm going to blend it until it's nice and smooth. When we tried putting all of the liquid in with the solids, it aerated the whole mixture. Yeah, and then it became this really strange orange color that looked nothing like tomato soup.
Okay.
Put this back in my saucepan. All right, make sure I get as much of that as possible. And rest of my soup. So it's still pretty warm. And I'm going to add my cream now. This is a 1/2 cup. And watch this color turn. It's absolutely beautiful. Oh, it's silky and it's smooth. Oh.
Now, we tested adding more cream. A lot of cream soups have a ton of cream in them, and you can't taste anything else but the cream. It's really not there for flavor. It's there more for texture.
Oh, it just adds such a nice mouthfeel to the soup. It's almost velveteen. I'm going to add some brandy. This is 2 tablespoons. You could also add dry sherry to it. I'm going to add it right at the last moment. Season it. And I'm just going to add a pinch of cayenne, because I know who my company is, but...
You're suggesting I don't like hot food?
I know you.
I have a very sensitive...
Is that what it is?
Yes, it is.
You know, a lot of people would add black pepper. We didn't like the flecks of black kind of hanging out in the soup. And plus, the cayenne just added a really nice warm roundness.
Okay.
Guess what? We're done.
Time to taste.
Time to taste.
Nice bowls, too. What is...
Thanks.
These are your mother's bowls or something? Did you bring them in for this?
I got these out of Grandma's
pretty.
china cabinet. I'm going to give you a couple croutons here.
We ready?
Let's dig in.
That's a long way from there to the...
It is a long
I'm
way.
going to make it shorter. Mmm.
Oh, yeah. That's
It
what
really
I'm
has
talking
a
about.
great sweetness. It's roasted. It's a very buttery soup, but it's not too thick.
The tomato flavor is incredible.
You usually think of a cream of tomato soup as being mostly cream and not much tomato flavor. This has mostly tomato flavor and just a little bit of cream.
Right.
Here's to a really terrific cream of tomato soup. Much better than canned.
Thank you.
In fact, it's one of our favorite recipes,
Yes.
as most of them are here in America's Test Kitchen. You know, if you're making strawberry daiquiris, you need a blender. But if you're just a cook in the kitchen, the question is, do you need one at all? Will a food processor do just as well? And if not, which model of blender works the best? So we're here in the equipment corner with Adam, who's done all the testing and will tell us what he found.
Several strawberry daiquiris later, First, Chris, why don't we compare a food processor bowl with a blender jar? I have the blender jar. You pick up the food processor bowl. You can see there's a big difference in shape. The blender jar is tall and narrow, so that the food actually builds up in a vortex inside the jar as the blade spins around. You may also be able to see that I have ridges called flutes on the inside of the blender jar, whereas yours is smooth.
So you got the Ferrari and I got the VW.
I got the
I'm
Ferrari
on the losing
this
end of
time.
this proposition. All right.
What the flutes do is they collapse that vortex and send the food back down onto the blade. The last difference is that I have 4 blades on the bottom of mine. You just have 2. So all of that creates more contact between the food and the blade. And that's why you get a smoother puree when you're pureeing liquids and solids together in a blender.
So the answer to the first question is you need a blender.
You need a blender.
Okay, which one do I need?
We tested 7 different models. You can see there are some differences. What we made was pureed broccoli soup, strawberry daiquiris, berry puree. We crushed some ice. We did a few other tests. And there were some performance differences. There are also some differences in design, as you can see. Some of these models have electronic touch pads, and they're easy to clean off. You can just wipe it off with a sponge, but you need to press 2 buttons to get it to operate on and the speed.
Is that true for all models or just some of them?
Just some of them.
Okay.
But in general, we weren't that impressed, at least in our tests. Likewise, the wider bowl. We like the taller, narrower jar, this style. We also weren't that impressed with a real range of speeds. We just wanted high, low, and a pulse feature to help chop ice or chop basil to make pesto. This was the winner. This is an Oysterizer. It's $40 from the hardware store,
that.
as a matter of fact. Let me demonstrate.
Okay.
We have chicken stock and broccoli in here. And you can probably see, I will get a bowl to pour it into, that we have a perfectly smooth puree. All of the broccoli is an even size. It's mixed well with the liquid. This one is a contrast. This was done in one of the losing blenders, and it's chunky.
So there is a big difference.
It's liquidy. What you want is that perfectly smooth puree.
So some of these other ones we didn't like. Some of them cost obviously more than 40 bucks. Or...
As a matter of fact, this is that old Waring bar blender, $130 almost.
That's the one I have at home. I always buy the most expensive. Okay, so the answer is you do need a blender instead of a food processor.
Absolutely.
And you can buy the one from the hardware store, the Oysterizer, for 40 bucks and the $130 one. Hey, it's not as good as the $40 version. Thank you.
My pleasure.
What if I said that we were going to make mushroom soup, not with some fancy exotic mushroom, but mostly with this simple button mushroom? You said I was crazy, but we're going to find a method to do it to really draw out a lot of flavor. And I know most of us now think of these as sort of crummy supermarket mushrooms, but in the 17th century, the Parisians loved them. They were very exotic. They're actually grown in caves just outside Paris. And now we're going to find a way to really draw out the flavor and make a great soup. Julia is here.
Hi.
Once again, to show us how we can do this.
Right. Well, first of all, start heating up a pot, of course. And what else would you start with but butter? A good 6 tablespoons, actually. The mushrooms really soak up that butter. So this butter's pretty much melted, and the foaming, you start to subside. And so 6 shallots, which is a fair amount. It's a major flavor ingredient besides the mushroom of the soup. And these you want to cook over medium heat. You want to really draw some of their acids out and their flavors right into that butter. And it takes about 4 minutes till they're pretty soft.
Okay.
So this is about 2 pounds of button mushrooms.
Okay.
Quite a bit. And it looks like a lot, like it's going to fill the pot, and it will, but they cook down to nothing, as I'm sure you know.
So we're going to cook this on fairly gentle heat for how long?
About 4 minutes.
Okay, and what are you looking for?
They're nice and soft, and they're starting to get translucent, which, as you can see, they are. And to that, we're going to add 2 cloves of garlic and a little bit of nutmeg. And this doesn't take long to saute. You just want to smell it all. It takes about 30 seconds to a minute. Oh, yeah.
It smells good.
Yeah, butter and shallots. And into this go the sliced mushrooms. And these we're going to cook uncovered for about 7 minutes over some higher heat, medium, high. And they're going to let some of the water evaporate out of the
So they're
mushrooms
going to
and
squeak
flavor.
when they're ready, or? I like squeaky mushrooms.
Really?
Yeah. Come on.
Fascinating. What do you mean squeaky
They
mushrooms?
get squeaky. They're going to
kind of
squeak.
mushrooms are
They're
you
going to
cooking?
squeak. They're going to squeak now.
I don't hear any squeaking.
It's looking bad for me.
I should put money on this one.
You know, I bet if I stirred, it could squeak.
No, go.
No, I'm gonna wait. They have to start releasing the liquid. It's too early yet.
Give it your best shot.
You probably did something to this so that it
Yeah,
wouldn't
that's what I
squeak.
did. I put my magic on
Their
it.
special anti-squeak.
Yeah, my
mushroom.
mojo's in there. It's preventing the squeak.
There's too many mushrooms
Yeah,
for
that's
squeaking.
the problem.
That's what it is.
Yeah, it's not that you're just
Maybe
crazy.
it's too much liquid. Maybe the heat's not high enough. Okay.
So,
Now we've gotten past that.
So as you see, yeah,
Issue.
the amount of volume has gone down on here significantly. It almost looks like half the amount of mushrooms that when we started. And I'm going to turn this down to medium and put the cover on. And we're going to turn it down a little bit lower. You don't want a lot of heat. That was just to get it going. And I'm going to cook this for about 20 minutes. They're going to release the rest of their juices.
Okay. So how long has this been now?
It's been about 20 minutes. Oh, and look at the drastic difference. The color's more intense. And I got to say, I haven't heard a peep from this pot since I put the lid on.
You can't hear squeaking when the lid's on.
Ah.
And they were just about to squeak, and the lid was on.
Excuses, I don't know. You see, a lot of liquid's been leached out. They're darker. And to this, we're going to start building the soup now. This is 4 cups of hot water. And you might think it's a little strange to add hot water and not stock, but if you add too much stock, it's going to taste like chicken.
Like
and you
chicken
want
soup
it
with
to,
mushrooms.
yeah, you want it to taste like mushroom soup. And this is 3.5 cups of chicken stock.
Speaking of not adding chicken stock,
Well, a little bit.
but it's diluted.
Yeah, it's a little bit of chicken stock to add a little bit of complexity and flavor. And these are dried porcinis that were just rinsed. We actually didn't rehydrate these, also known as a sep. So that was half an ounce. And I'm going to crank this just to get it up to a good simmer.
So I thought we were making these all with basic supermarket mushrooms, and now you're
Well,
adding a little sep to the liquid.
Yeah, well,
You just can't help yourself.
well, these little suckers, they have this intense flavor that you just can't be matched with fresh mushrooms. So we're going to bring
So
this.
why don't you make them all with sep?
Oh, that would be just way
Could be
too
too
potent.
much?
Yeah,
Okay.
that'd be more like a sauce. So bring this up to a simmer. Put the cover on. You want to turn it down. You just want to turn it up high to get it to the simmer.
Okay.
Turn it to medium, low, and again, another 20 minutes.
So it's been 20 minutes, and the soup is...
Oh, smelling good.
Okay.
Now, it goes into the blender. And I only fill it up halfway. Too much more than that, and you really get a mess on your hands.
Great.
And I always put a towel on top just in
That's a good
case. And this isn't going to get strained, so you want to get it pretty smooth. There we go. So you just keep on doing this. All right, I think that's the last of it. There we go. We're going to finish it with a little bit of heavy cream, because it is a cream soup. Now, cream, when you add it to soups, you don't ever want to bring it back to a boil, because you have the possibility that it might break.
And also, if you make this ahead of time, you shouldn't add the creams you're ready
Right,
to serve.
exactly.
Sure.
And this is 1/3 cup of Madeira. You could also use dry sherry. Adds a nice little kick, helps bring those mushroom flavor out. And this is a little bit of lemon juice and some salt. And you'll put some pepper in there. And we're gonna saute off a couple more unusual mushrooms for a garnish.
We have some creminis.
Yeah.
The nice, rich flavor.
These are also known as baby bellas or baby portobellas.
And these are, look like oyster mushrooms to me.
Nice big king oyster mushrooms.
And they actually have a slightly oysterish
Yeah.
flavor to them.
And these are the shiitakes.
Those are nice,
And these are
earthy.
enoki. They're very delicate,
Okay.
kind of perfumey. And this is 2 tablespoons of butter. Now, as you can imagine, these mushrooms don't all cook at the same rate. These enoki are going to take no time at all. They're going to go at the very end. But these shiitake and the cremini take a bit longer. And the oyster don't take too long, but they take a little longer than the enoki do. And I'm going to put a little salt and pepper in them now. The salt helps draw their moisture out and helps the flavor get into the mushroom. So now we're going to put a cover on these for about 9-10 minutes. And you're going to let the water come out.
So we snuck the oysters in here.
Right.
And you weren't looking.
Right, they only take a couple minutes under
Okay.
the lid, while the others take a bit longer. And now we're going to crank the heat up and get a nice sear on them. You see they're a lot smaller. They've released some of their moisture. Are they squeaking?
Here. At long last, I'm vindicated.
all right, wait.
Come on, no, let's hear it some more. I want to hear it some more.
Now you got me
Yeah,
hearing
see?
things.
Now they're squeaking. Okay, we have squeak.
All right, so see how these are nice and crisp and brown? They're going to look really pretty with just a few sprinkled on top of the soup. And finally, the enoki. So this pan has a lot of heat in it. I'm just going to turn it off, actually. Let the enoki kind of wilt. All right, you want to plate us up some soup?
Yeah. This garnish is not only pretty, but adds a little bit of texture, too,
Yeah.
like the croutons did with the tomato
Exactly.
soup.
You wanna-
And extra flavor.
Yep.
Now we'll see if we get that wonderful concentrated mushroom flavor that we promised.
Oh, it's so velvety.
But it has a really rich mushroom flavor.
And it's kind of quiet.
They only, let's do this one more time. They squeak when you're cooking them So there we have it from America's Test Kitchen. Cream of mushroom soup with just a little bit of cream, 2 pounds of mushrooms,
Right.
and just those cheap supermarket brands. The French thought were really exotic back in the 17th century. And great, and great intense flavor.
Right.
And a nice little garnish to boot.
Yeah.
For today's recipes and more, visit us at americastestkitchen.com. Detailed recipes for everything cooked in this series are available in the new cookbook, America's Test Kitchen. The book contains 200 easy-to-follow recipes, over 200 photos, and 100 illustrations, plus detailed results from over 57 food tastings and equipment tests. To order your copy by credit card, call 1-800-888-6660. The price is $29.95 plus handling. Brought to you by Sub-Zero Freezer Company, makers of refrigerators for many rooms, many lifestyles. From the classic framed look to stainless steel or disguised with an overlay. Sub-Zero Freezer Company, creating a full line of refrigerators for the home. And by Sur La Table, suppliers of equipment to cooks and professional chefs at Sur La Table stores and catalogs nationwide. And by Geerlings & Wade, helping you to be an educated wine connoisseur. A worldwide selection delivered to your door.